Hi everyone, it's William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series. We are in 1935 today. Things were starting to heat up in 1915, but we're taking a break from that to do 1935. So the recap for 1915, we had Dmitri's final departure from Usovo, truly final, I believe, and his pursuit of Natalia Barasova, and not happy, apparently, that there were other people around when he wanted to spend time with her on his own. And maybe she anticipated that and had a few people around. I don't know. Well, my dogs and the crows are always feuding. All right, 1935, our last 1935 entry, part of Dmitri's address to the Young Russia Party. He referred to the extreme right-wing members of the immigration as speaking with foaming lips and calling for truly distressing things. Okay, so our cast today, we have Alexander Kazembek, the founder and head of the Young Russia Party. Oh, they get so angry at my dog when he's out here. And we have Ducky, the one that I mentioned yesterday as someone that Dmitri had issues with. Okay, but not anymore, apparently. Well, I think he still had issues with both Kirill and Ducky, but he was keeping that to himself, according to his son, Paul Ilinsky. Okay, here we go. This is, by the way, the end of that address, I guess, but then in this publication of Dmitri's speeches, it was printed by the party itself and distributed. There's a second part, the party feast day in Paris, 15th July 1935. So I had told you that the party feast day must have been in September and October, because Dmitri had referred to a previous speech several months after, that he'd given several months before this address on the party feast day. So I thought, well, it has to be September, October. But I'm confused. Dmitri always has a weird thing about time, but I'm not going to blame him. It could be my misunderstanding of when he gave speeches. But he frequently also got time wrong. He had a strange time sense. Okay, so as I was going to say, we'll finish up with that address, and then we'll have this little excerpt from something else apparently that he said at that feast day in July 1935. So again, kind of confusing. All right, here we go. The head of the party and I had the good fortune to be in Saint-Briac on St. Vladimir's Day. We spent 3 days there and came away with an indelible impression of the One with a capital O, who, as I said in my address of 12th June, stands before us all as an example of sacrificial service to the motherland. But remember, young Russians, that he is not alone. Beside him stands his faithful friend, his self-sacrificing helper. I'm referring to the Empress, who has stood firmly and unswervingly behind us throughout the entire existence of the Young Russia movement, imbued with a masculine spirit of self-sacrifice, tirelessly sharing the cares and labors of the sovereign. She is filled with fervent hope and confidence in the rightness of the work they are doing for the glory and greatness of Russia. Young Russians, ! I greet you on our feast day. Always carry within you the sacred spark that has inspired you to fight in our ranks. Look ahead, only ahead. With the memory of Russia's glorious past etched in your heart, fight with all your strength to your very last breath for Russia's future. Okay, wow. The next little bit, at the party feast day in Paris, 15th July 1935. So the same occasion. Young Russians, I have wholeheartedly accepted the chairmanship of the main council of the Young Russia Party. Remember that 12 years ago, the initiative to create the Young Russia movement, which has now grown so large that it's transformed into a party, came from the man who is still leading you today. You found me, and I found you, but we would not have come together if it had not been for one man. That man is Kazembek. Okay. Dmitri didn't have particularly kind things to say about Kazembek in 1939, although he hadn't split from him entirely. Okay. Here we go. Lots of triggering words there. You know the things that strike a nerve with me by now if you've been watching these all along. I will just say that St. Vladimir's Day was July 28th, and of course the heir Tsarevich, supposedly Grand Duke, was named Vladimir, Kirill's son. So here we have this language again. I think Sambriac is where, I think it's in Normandy. That was the main residence of Kirill and Ducky and their family. The One with a capital O makes me think of this British series I used to like called The Mighty Boosh, where there was a song in one of the episodes, a satire, of course. What was it? I love this song. I love the chosen one. Loving him is so much fun. And then it goes on and gets even more silly. So these references to sacrifice. This speech is full of references to sacrifice. And it's not that Dmitri never used that language, because he did back in 1921, in particular, when he was feeling a little sorry for himself because he really wanted to get married to a nice girl and settle down, but he felt like he had to sacrifice himself as the likely future Tsar of Russia and make a dynastic marriage. So it's not that he doesn't use this language, but from what I've read in other Young Russia publications, I think that was just party-wide. That was a word they emphasized. And of course, Kirill had entitled his memoirs "My Life in Russia's Service," which, yeah, not really. I mean, come on. You know, I feel for the guy. He had genuinely suffered from fairly serious, I think, post-traumatic stress syndrome, as we would call it today, after being in the Russo-Japanese War and being on a ship where he and one other person were the only survivors when it sunk. And I don't think he ever got over that. But anyway, very interesting language. Kirill is the One, and Ducky is the Empress, who is also sacrificing. Wow, that's really putting it out there. That's not only saying that they are indeed the sovereigns in exile, but that Russia is still an empire and will be still an empire when the transition is made from the Soviet Union to the monarchy. That's a bit over the top, old boy, calling her the Empress, but I suppose he felt compelled to. And you and I both know, those of you who watched the videos from 1921, just how heated things got between Dmitri and Ducky, and how, you know, Kirill wouldn't have done it, but she told him to his face that he should be shot. You know, and here he is calling her the Empress, and why is he talking about her at all? I'm not sure. That must have been something that somebody asked him to emphasize, Kazembek or Kirill himself, because I just can't imagine that. You know, the funny thing is that in 1915, as you'll see in upcoming diary entries, he was quite friendly with her. He obviously respected her. He would go and visit her on his own. Maybe part of it was that he was head over heels, or claimed to be, in love with her sister, Maria of Romania. So maybe he just liked being close to Ducky because of that. And he would still be talking about that in 1921. He'd be talking about it in 1908. He'd be talking about it in 1921. So apparently they were fond of each other at one point, and then they became very much antagonistic to each other for a while, and then apparently there's this kind of rapprochement. But given what Paul Alinsky told me, seems like it was artificial. Okay, now here's what really delights me about this. we are playing some clever little games here, my friends. I had forgotten about some of these things. Okay, I should say first that Dmitri now refers to Kirill as the sovereign, Gasudar, but not as the emperor, not as Gasudar Imperator. Anyway, okay, so the name of the so I was looking ahead and seeing that the next, when we're finished, which we now are, with this feast day appearance that Dmitri made, we will be going next to an article he wrote, and that he himself wrote, and that article was published in a journal called Iskra, or Iskra. I don't know where the, as so often with Russian, I don't know where the stress is. Nice thing about French, you never have to wonder about that. But with Russian, like with English, you just never know, unless you've heard the word spoken. And I mostly deal with Russian text, of course. Anyway, Iskra, why is that important? Why is it important that the Young Russia Party chose that name out of all other possibilities for their journal? Well, because anybody in Russia at that time would have known that, or in before the revolution, long before the revolution, at the turn of the 19th century, 20th century, would have been sparked by the name Spark, because Spark was the main Russian communist publication, journal. It was the publication of basically the Russian Communist Party, and Lenin, I believe, was one of the founders. I found a picture online of sort of the editorial board, and Lenin was one of them and kind of the driving force behind it. So given that this was a word, spark, that everybody associated with the Russian revolutionary movement, why did Young Russia decide to choose that? Yeah, being very clever, as I said. But you can see why this was ruffling feathers, especially on the right, because even at this time, Kazanbek was suspected of being a Soviet asset, and he was definitely a fellow traveler, and Dmitri would be accused of being a crypto-Bolshevik, and you can say, hey, there's a little bit to that. Iskra ended up being a Menshevik publication, and then I think it was sort of more general in the Soviet Union. I don't know, but this is fascinating that they chose that name. And not only that, once I recalled that, I realized that Young Russia itself, that name, came also from a revolutionary source, and that was a manifesto issued in 1862, a revolutionary manifesto that was called Young Russia. It was the Young Russia or Young Russian Manifesto. And so again, everybody who knew anything about the pre-revolutionary movement, when the revolutionaries were not large and in charge before the revolution itself, anybody who knew about that knew about the Young Russia Manifesto. So again, boy, they're playing with fire here a bit, or with sparks, so to speak. Okay, now all of this stuff about fight to your last breath, sacrifice, so on and so forth, fight to your very last breath. And Dmitri uses the word iskra himself when he says, always carry within you the sacred spark, the iskra. Okay, so I'm really fascinated about this. I'm sorry if I'm just going on and on about it. There's a line that he ends with that I love, and I hope he himself wrote it. I think he did. You found me and I found you. He's talking, addressing the Young Russia members. And that's very sweet, isn't it? I like that. You found me and I found you. We could almost say that about him ourselves, at least in the first part of it, or the second part of it, because we found him. I guess we can't say on his behalf that he found us. But anyway, you found me and I found you. But then he has to ruin it, because he goes on and says, and the one who brought us together was, how does he put it? Let's see. Yeah, you found me and I found you, but we would not have come together if it had not been for one man. This time one is not with a capital O. That man is, dun da da da, Kazim Bek. Okay, old boy. So what do we have next time? We have, well, as I said, in 1935, we have an article written by Dmitri himself in the Young Russia journal Iskra. Okay, and it's filling us in a little bit about Dmitri's own history with Young Russia. Okay, in 1915, we have the anniversary of Uncle Sergei's death. And we also have Maria arrives, and the two of them, they commemorate Sergei's death. And then that evening at 9:30, they get on a train for Petrograd. And I'm trying to remember if during the rest of the 1915 diaries, if Dmitri ever goes back to Moscow. I'm sure he went there before the whole Rasputin thing and the revolution and his expulsion from Russia. But this is pretty much it from Moscow. And we're going to Petrograd. And guess who just happens to be going on the same train? The Yusupovs, young Felix and Irina, who'd been Princess Irina, the daughter of Grand Duchess Ksenia and Grand Duke Alexander. So we're going to start to see, something of the relationship between Dmitri and Felix and both Yusupovs. All right, very eventful stuff. I'm sorry if I yammered on, but I think it's really important, and I'm proud that you can get that extra context in this video series that you're not going to get elsewhere. All right, so I hope to see you next time.